Hello and welcome to Farm Connections. I'm your host, Dan Hoffman. On today's program, we head to FarmFest and talk to Commissioner of Agriculture, Thom Petersen, about the future of Minnesota agriculture, and Ken Thiesse joins us to discuss international issues and the economy. In addition to all of that, we have a new best practice segment brought to us by the University of Minnesota Extension, all here today on Farm Connections.
Welcome to Farm Connections with your host, Dan Hoffman.
Farm Connections made possible in part by
Alcorn Clean Fuel, a farmer-owned renewable energy producer in Claremont, Minnesota for more than 20 years, producing ethanol, high-protein livestock feed, and corn oil for resale to benefit its members and their communities. Absolute Energy, a locally owned facility, produces 115 million gallons of ethanol annually, proudly supporting local economies in Iowa and Minnesota. Absolute Energy, adding value to the neighborhood.
Back in 1944, Sam Bauer had a vision to provide tires and heating oil to families. This second and third generation family-run business is still focused on commercial truck, retread tires, tires for your passenger vehicles, and farm equipment too.
Novel Energy Solutions, committed to working with farmers and landowners to deliver a new crop, electricity. More about income potential and lease agreements designed to be top performers at novelenergy.biz.
We're at FarmFest, and with me is Commissioner Thom Petersen from the Department of Ag. Welcome to Farm Connection, sir.
Thanks, Dan. Appreciate it.
Well, this is interesting. You're not in the office in St. Paul. What's going on?
Yeah, well, it's just great to be here at Minnesota's largest farm show, spending 3 days out here talking to our farmers and ag businesses and really trying to just listen and see what's going on here.
Well, why is that important?
Oh, it's just so important to, the discussions that I've had and to hear and see really how we deliver our programs at the Department of Agriculture and other agencies, and be kind of the ears and eyes for our governor as well here at FarmFest. And it's been a wonderful and warm last couple of days.
Well, Governor Walz was here yesterday, and if I understand it right, he brought some people with him.
Yeah, it was really fortunate to have Governor Walz. He spent 4 or 5 hours here yesterday, and I was really honored to have 9 of my fellow commissioners join me here yesterday. So we had like the Revenue Commissioner, the DNR Commissioner, PCA Commissioner, and farmers, really, I get more questions a lot of times about DNR issues or tax issues, commerce, health, all these different issues. And so it was wonderful to have those commissioners here as well.
When a farmer wishes to expand his farm or even stay in compliance, he calls on a number of professionals.
It does a lot of times. And so sometimes it can be scary kind of calling the PCA or interacting with the PCA. So sometimes it's helpful to, call the agriculture commissioner or have maybe run a little interference, or kind of make that first call or have some advice. And so I think that the departments all do a fantastic job, but it's nice too when I can help a little bit or make that first call or try to see if there's ways we can work together for different businesses and farms.
Well, you bring up a great point. Farms produce lots of things, but along with them are team players in industry that, for example, crush the soybeans and make soybean meal and other products or supply farm equipment. What do you do beyond just working with farmers?
Yeah, so we have so many businesses and farm businesses in Minnesota. Minnesota's a leader. If you look at, Hormel, General Mills, all the different companies that we have here in Minnesota, really proud to have when I go to national meetings or talk around the United States. We have some great businesses. We have a lot of small innovative businesses too. And farmers got to sell their stuff, and so we need our markets. Farmers depend on manufacturers. Technology is so important right now for farmers, and that's exciting. So whatever we can do to help boost our agricultural businesses too as well at the department is important.
When you talked about selling product or stuff, what does the Department of Ag in Minnesota do to help promote trade? And we need it around the world.
We do. We have a lot of different programs. So we have marketing assistance programs, which are very important for our products and our farmers. We help farmers that maybe have a company, whether they sell popcorn, different bigger commodities, whether it's bulk IP, soybeans or organic products. We can help you sell just about anything or help connect. That's one of the big things for me as a commissioner, is being just a connector to companies or other farmers, other commissioners, other countries. We hosted a Nigerian delegation here about an hour ago who was really interested in buying our products. And so the department has a lot of resources that we can help our farmers and our companies.
Are there any other international markets that you've looked at and helped farmers with?
Yeah, I was proud to lead my first trade mission to Colombia and Peru this summer, and I was really interested to see what that was like. That was a new experience for me, but I was blown away. I think we started at 7 o'clock in the morning and we finished about 10:30 at night, and we had wall-to-wall meetings with buyers, with companies, with government officials that wanted to know our companies, wanted to know our growers, wanted to know how we produced our food, and tremendous opportunities. Bogota, Lima, they have populations of 10 million people each, roughly. Our population here is 5.6 million in Minnesota. So they need some of our products, and so a tremendous opportunity.
Speaking of that, I'm certain you partner with other agencies and commodity groups. That helps us a lot, and our farmers actually fund those commodity groups by providing some cash from when they sell corn or soybeans or pork. How do you partner with those commodity groups?
They do. Really important. Our commodity councils play an important role in hosting delegations, of coordinating farms. This weekend we have a delegation from Cuba here with our potato growers up in northwest Minnesota. So just about every week there's a different delegation here from a different country that wants to do business with the United States, and so that's very important. They go to other countries as well and represent Minnesota, and so it's a tremendous importance for our farmers again in Minnesota.
It's important for other countries and delegates to see what we do here, and when they get on a farm and see the care and the concern that farmers have for the product and delivering a quality product, that's one piece. But when our farmers and producers and government officials travel to another country, we learn something too, don't we?
We really do. When I was in Colombia and Peru, it was eye-opening, and I thought it was really fascinating to see like the different products they grow and the amount of products they grow. Is fascinating to see their transportation system, is just not what ours is. And we talk a lot about the need for roads and bridges. They're a little behind us on that, and it hammers home those points as well.
Hammers home the point how important it is for us to maintain what we've got.
Exactly.
And how disadvantaged we are if we don't have it.
Exactly. Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
Recently I was at a seminar when it spoke about world wealth. And we come in the past few decades, we moved from the majority of the world being in poverty to the majority of the world being in relative wealth. How does that change what we should be doing as ag producers?
Yeah, it's a great question. Again, not to spend a lot of time on Colombia or Peru, but that's where I went. And one of the reasons we went there is they said they have a growing middle class. And I asked what that meant at both countries, because they said that, and I thought that was striking. I said, what does that mean? They have a growing middle class. And what it means is they have more expendable money. So they have, after they pay their bills, they have money left over to buy, more food or better food or different food. And I said, that's tremendous. And so I think that's what we're seeing around the world, is that there's more wealth in countries where people have more expendable income to buy goods. And so I think that is helpful.
Thom, I really respect that you and your agency are taking some of the politics out of it and saying, wait a minute, people to people, food for people. How important that really, really is. Thank you for that.
Yeah, thank you, Dan. I think that, we worked really hard this last legislative session. We're proud to have a bill that passed the Senate unanimously, and we had, I think, just a handful of votes against our agricultural bill, and that's the way it should be, I think, as agriculture is a nonpartisan issue. Everybody eats, everybody supports our farmers, and I was proud to have that happen this last session.
So important to Minnesota's economy, so important to our producers, but also agribusiness.
Absolutely.
All businesses.
Absolutely.
And that we certainly can break down across all party lines, break down the rural versus urban and vice versa, because we all eat.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
What kinds of initiatives do you have? When we look at our population of farmers, the demographics is aging a bit. How do we get, and what programs do you have for younger farmers coming in?
We have several initiatives at the Department of Agriculture. We're really proud to have what I think is a nation-leading beginning farmer tax credit that is a tax credit for farmers who rent to a beginning farmer or who lease land to a beginning farmer. And so that information is on our website if you just look at beginning farmer tax credit. And that's been very popular. We've had almost 800 people use that in the last year. One of those credits we have a beginning farmer loan program through our Rural Finance Authority. That's our most popular loan program. And so we have a really good suite of things that we're doing to help beginning farmers. We're starting an emerging farmer advisory committee that will advise me on issues, access to land, credit, things like that we can do better. So we're really being aggressive on that so that 20 years from now we have people that are farming and hopefully living on those farms.
Fantastic. And do you have advisory committees too in addition to that?
We do. We have quite a few different ones, whether it's advising us on pesticides, biodiesel, fertilizer. We have quite a few different advisory committees that we try to be smart on, that we use our Minnesotans' times to advise us on, that I think are very helpful to me as a commissioner.
Well, someone was strategic when they put the Minnesota Department of Ag and the Minnesota Department of Health really adjacent to each other with a common area. Why was that done?
We do a lot of work together with human health, animal disease. We intersect quite a bit. And if you've ever been to the Department of Agriculture, our 5th floor, I look across at the Department of Health and the commissioner. I wave to her every morning. But it reminds us that there are a lot of different places where we work together. And it's so important that we protect the health of Minnesotans.
We're so interconnected.
Absolutely.
You spoke about disease and those kinds of things. African swine flu, what are we doing to protect our hog industry, which is huge in our state, both on the production side and then adding value to the products and then shipping them all over the world?
Yeah, and African swine fever, just a really big concern as it spreads throughout China and Asia and different parts of that it would just be decimating and to our herd and not only just to our swine population, but also think about our feed industry. You know, we feed a lot of soybeans, corn to our hog in Minnesota, you know, being a number 2 state in hog production. You know, we need to keep it out of not just Minnesota and the United States, but North America in general. So I think that we run a lot of drills. We work with our Board of Animal Health, our pork producers. We also are backyard producers. Everybody needs to be vigilant and have plans. We work with the customs. It's an amazing effort to work to keep this out of our country, and our producers and farmers are doing a good job of being vigilant on this.
What's your hope for Minnesota agriculture going forward?
Yeah, you know, it all just starts with a price and a better way of life for farmers, having the lowest farm income in 2018 that we've had in the last 23 years. That my hope is that we've bottomed out and we're on our way back up, you know, and that you know, we can, you know, I want farmers out on the farms, and I want farmers to do better. And so everything we can do every day to make those lives better for farmers is it's about as basic as that, Dan, so that we can move forward and have prosperous farms. And it's tough with weather, trade, everything else that goes along, but it's about that simple.
Thank you for your good work and leadership.
Yep, thank you, Dan. Appreciate the opportunity.
Stay tuned for more on Farm Connections.
Farm Connections Best Practices, brought to you by
I'm Brad Carlson, Extension Educator with University of Minnesota Extension. Welcome to our Best Practices segment. Today we're going to talk about using variable rate nitrogen treatments. There's been a little bit of a trend towards using variable rate nitrogen in fields as the ability to do precision agriculture has increased on farms as well as with the providers of fertilizer. But there's a few things to think about if you're going to use variable rate nitrogen in your fields. First and foremost is to have an idea how rate is determined in the first place. In a lot of cases, our University of Minnesota recommended rates are actually applicable to most situations. So if we think about our nitrogen rate trials that we've done historically, it's really like a sort of variable rate nitrogen treatment all across the state. And what we find is that the rates that we recommend are good in about 80% of circumstances. And so now if we break that down into an individual field, we similarly see in a lot of circumstances The recommended rate is adequate to even more nitrogen than necessary, and the amount of area in a field that needs higher rates of nitrogen typically is actually quite small. So for that reason, we usually look at seeing a cost savings on the amount of nitrogen we spread versus a yield increase, because you're not going to see a yield increase when you apply less nitrogen. If you're thinking about using variable rate nitrogen for next growing season, there's a couple of different methods that are being used for prescribing variable rates. The most popular right now is using crop models. There are a number of these available commercially. And what these models do is they try to predict the amount of growth that the corn has during the growing season based on when it was planted and the amount of heat units that were accumulated. And then they also project the amount of nitrogen that's necessary in the crop to reach that growth phase unencumbered. And so in addition to that, they're also using additions to the amount of fertilizer you supply, but also the amount of nitrogen being supplied through organic matter in the soil, and then potential losses, which are water driven, either through leaching or denitrification, and coming up with a nitrogen balance. At some point in the growing season, usually about V4, V6, we look at making that rate recommendation, then applying the variable rate. A final area you need to think about if you're going to use variable rate nitrogen is how you're going to evaluate success. I've talked to a number of farmers who have said, well, I tried that and it didn't work. And I would ask, well, what do you mean it didn't work? Well, we got the same yields that we got when we just applied a base rate of nitrogen. And the thing I like to remind farmers is this technology is intended to make a nitrogen rate recommendation. So in a lot of cases, if you're getting the same yield as you would have gotten with a flat rate of nitrogen, it worked because it gave a correct recommendation of nitrogen. They're not necessarily tabbed as increasing your yields. It's really only circumstances where we would see a response to a much higher amount of nitrogen than we otherwise would have applied that we expect to see high yields. Variable rate nitrogen is an interesting technology and it shows a lot of potential, and you might want to explore using it on your farm. I'm Brad Carlson, Extension Educator at the University of Minnesota Extension.
We're at Farm Fest near Morgan, Minnesota, and with me is Kent Thiesse. Welcome to Farm Connections, Kent.
Hey, great to be on.
Well, it's great to have you, and of course, your work as forum coordinator is so important. Tell us about that.
Well, Farm Fest, of course, annually runs for 3 days out here in Redwood County, and I've actually been involved with Farm Fest for nearly 30 years now. It goes all the way back to when it was in Lake Crystal area in the late 1980s, and then of course it moved from there for 4 years down at Austin, and since 1994 has been at its current site next to the Gilfillan Estate here outside of Morgan in Redwood County. And I guess I've been involved. I got involved back in my days in the Extension Service just because educational forums are an important part of an event like Farm Fest. I mean, obviously there's the equipment and exhibits here to see and everything else going on, but also I think it's a great opportunity to educate farmers and others that are here, to bring in some of our national and state leaders to talk about policy issues, and it's been pretty successful over the years.
Well, it has, and even today, listening to our Secretary of Agriculture, Sonny Perdue, amazing, and Senator Petersen.
Right. It was really a very wonderful session this year to have a U.S. House Ag Committee listening session on the farm economy. And of course, Colin Petersen from Minnesota's 7th District is the current chair of that committee. And I had talked to him last winter about having that type of session, and we were going to bring in the Minnesota congressional delegation and invite other members of the U.S. House Ag Committee. But then through some conversations, the Secretary of Agriculture kind of wanted to come to Farm Fest, and we were able to bring it all together where the Secretary and Congressman Petersen as chair and the other members all took part in the same forum. And that doesn't happen a lot outside of Washington, D.C., so it was a pretty neat opportunity.
Well, and they get to see the best of Minnesota agriculture and our most important resource, our people.
Right, and we do have a lot of ag leaders in Minnesota, both statewide and nationally, and we had a tremendous crowd there today, and outside of maybe 10 to 15 minutes of opening comments, the rest of it was all Q&A and comments from the audience, and on a whole variety of topics related to agriculture and rural issues.
Well, it's important for those policymakers as they go back to their capitals or in this Congress to have some things based on what's really happening out on farm country. What do you think they learned today?
Well, obviously, one of the big things that comes out, and that part of that is just the current topic of the day, is all the trade issues. And of course, as Farm Fest was held, there were some recent issues around trade with China and some added tariffs being put on by the U.S. and the Chinese pulling back on importing some U.S. ag products. So that was certainly on everybody's mind. And then also the United States-Mexico-Canada agreement, the fact that that needs to be approved by Congress and ultimately put into action. So, you know, those two things certainly dominated, but we also hit on things like rural broadband, on healthcare issues, on certainly the struggling farm economy and the low prices and how we deal with that, the disaster and market facilitation payments. So again, a whole variety of issues. And then some people have very specific issues related to the livestock industry, related to some of the specialty crops, even a couple questions on the hemp industry. So we did hit a wide range of topics today.
And it was well received. Great audience, great participation. Minnesota is at a special place geographically. We're all the way inland, about as far as you can get, very close to the center of North America. That gives us some special challenges for trade, and trade's really important to agriculture. About a third of our soybean crop, for example, would go to China in a normal situation. So when the market's disrupted, we've got to do something different. Any thoughts?
Yeah, I think throughout Farm Fest here, there's been some discussions on that. Are there alternative crops? Is hemp that crop? You know, how do we adjust? Can we find other markets for our soybeans or other uses? You know, it is in all export markets. If we can utilize more for renewable energy and renewable fuel, all of those types of things kind of all spin into that.
Well, Kent, besides being the coordinator of the forum here at Farm Fest, you do some other things too. Tell us about that.
Well, my full-time job, I'm an ag lender in Lake Crystal at Minstar Bank, which is a locally owned community bank, and been there a number of years now. So I work with farm families every day, and we go through some of the struggles we're talking about here, trying to put a budget and cash flow together and make it work. And I kind of, as an ag lender, just like the farmers, go through the ups and downs of the markets and weather issues, and when the USDA crop reports come out, and trying to figure out where we're at. And I enjoy what I do, but it's certainly challenging right now.
What advice do you have as a lender to your customers or agriculture producers in general?
Well, I think first of all, don't worry necessarily what your neighbor's doing or someone else. Look at your own situation, your own budget. When you do get profit opportunities, such as we have had a few with being able to maybe market at some profitable prices, take advantage of those, and watch your costs. I mean, whether it's farm costs, non-farm costs, you have to adjust as the dollars change, and always be looking for new opportunities, I guess, too. And the last thing, I guess, would be to stay positive. Try to, and if you are having issues with where the stress is getting to you or whatever, use the resources that are available out there.
Great advice, Kent. Thank you so much.
You bet, thanks.
Stay tuned for more on Farm Connections.
Secretary of Agriculture Sonny Perdue headed a list of dignitaries in agriculture at Farm Fest this year that talked about many issues. However, trade was number one. Zippy Duvall, president of the American Farm Bureau Federation, was also there, as was Colin Petersen, chairman of the House Ag Committee.
I think, again, we've got to look at this. Maybe it's like it's darkest before the dawn. I think we realize that we've got to get some resolution to this, and hopefully we can do it sooner rather than later. I think China will be coming back in September, so we'll continue talking. But frankly, the ball is in China's court. If they know what we want, we were almost 90% of there when they were here in April before the talks broke down. We need to get back there and finish the deal where we could trade in a fair and free and reciprocal way with China.
Farmers always goes into every planting season looking forward to having a good crop, and we'll get this one behind us. We'll look forward to the next one. We'll continue to work on the issues like trade and other issues with the President and the Secretary, try to make the future of agriculture better.
I was afraid that this was the outcome we're going to have, and now it looks like what happened Monday is that the Chinese just really got ticked off. Now they're not going to buy any ag stuff. I don't know how this gets resolved, beyond me.
State leaders were also on hand at Farm Fest, and they echoed the comments that trade continues to be the number one issue on farmers' minds.
It's a very tough issue. Just a few moments ago I had a chance to talk a minute or two with the Secretary of Ag and talked about these exact issues, and he's a great supporter for agriculture. His take is that we still have to get China to agree to some different terms, and the message I tried to relay to him is what happens if we never get some of these markets back? And there wasn't a good answer. He said, well, we got to stick with it. But I said, it's getting harder and harder to stick with it.
And we export about 25% of all the pork that's produced in the United States. So when we get these episodes that happen that really upset the apple cart on trade, it has a direct result as to what happens with hog price. And obviously that makes a difference for hog producers. It makes a difference for rural communities.
There are many, many issues facing agriculture, and typically, if you asked a farmer what's the number one issue, you would get a different response from anybody you talk to. Right now, the people that are walking down this aisle, if you say what's the big issue, they say trade. This is Lynn Kettleson reporting.
Well, that will just about do it from Farm Fest. I'm Dan Hoffman. Thanks for joining us on Farm Connections.